Money Mondays, powered by the Joseph Business School, where we bring you up-to-date money news for your personal finances and businesses. I'm your host, Geil Thompson. To our new viewers, thank you for tuning into our podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Pamela C.V. Jolly, founder and CEO of Torch Enterprises, Inc., a strategic investment firm committed to minority business, growth, and development. Torch Enterprises has assisted over 1,000 entrepreneurs, national nonprofits, trade organizations, the federal government, foundations, and financial institutions. For over a decade, Dr. Jolly has been committed to developing data-driven strategies that lead to wealth as a legacy in the African-American community. Today, Dr. Jolly joins us to share her focus to pursue business opportunities that pass the torch from one generation to the next, building wealth through ownership and equity. Money Monday audience, please help me welcome Dr. Jolly to our segment.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jill. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Dr. Jolly, you use your expertise and extensive background in financial services around strategy, community development, as well as theology to help entrepreneurs succeed in business. Can you tell us how you do this?
Yes. So the primary purpose of business is to build wealth for its owners. And it's important to be mindful of that when you start an endeavor. And everything can be looked at through the lens of business. So you are a business, your community is a business, your state is a business, city, and our nation is a business. And so these are relationships, interconnected relationships that get increasingly intimate. The least intimate relationship you can have is transaction. That's a job or a purchase, but there's so much more to the relationship. So I help people build better relationships with each other so that we can build wealth together.
That's excellent, Dr. Jolly. Your focus has been to pursue business opportunities that pass the torch from one generation to the next. You talk about building wealth through ownership and equity. Can you explain this concept to our audience? What does it exactly mean?
Definitely. So everyone is familiar with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that really isn't the way it was originally written by George Mason. It was life, liberty, and the pursuit of ownership. In the early stages of America, if you did not own, you could not vote. So ownership is really important. And the first piece of property that you must own is what I call the business of you. Now, equity is wealth stored up. It also is a financial term that represents your balance sheet, which is what I call the heart of the matter. Oftentimes, we hold things that we love so much and so close to our heart, and the liabilities often scare us, which means that we overlook the equity that we've inherited and the equity that we have stored up. So it's important for us to take possession of the things that we have that are around us and in us, but it also is important for us to acknowledge that we started from a wealth perspective, and so there's wealth stored up in us. So I help people look at the brighter piece of the puzzle. So many people look at the less thans and the have-nots. Where is a surplus and abundance of opportunities? And once you understand business, you can definitely figure out a way to be able to pursue it.
Excellent. And Dr. Jolly, in 2004, you spoke at our Economic Empowerment Summit. Something unique took place this day. Can you describe what happened?
It was such a powerful day, and I will remain grateful to Pastor Bill Winston and his beautiful wife for the opportunity. I first have to thank God above, because I'd never spoken in front of a crowd that big, but also Marcia Dyson, Michael Eric Dyson's wife, is the one that introduced me to Pastor Bill Winston. When I told my mother that I was invited to speak at the Economic Empowerment Summit, my mother said, "Pastor Bill Winston? I've been listening to him for years." He was gracious enough to fly her from Philadelphia. I was currently in New Orleans post-Katrina working on the rebuild. And so being able to see my mother's eyes light up in the front row as I was able to speak about building wealth God's way was so powerful. I was in the middle. I was actually towards the end, the 37th day of a 40-day fast. And I remember after I spoke, Pastor Bill Winston and his deacon board took me to lunch. And I didn't want to say I couldn't eat the beautiful food, so I had hot water with lemon. And Pastor said, "You don't like the food?" And I said, "Oh, no, that's not it. I'm just fasting." And his head deacon said, "May I ask what day you are on?" And I said, 37. And he said, "A 40?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, that's why the Holy Spirit was so alive on the stage. And so I started sharing more about what my prayers were for New Orleans and the rebuilding of our communities. And Pastor prophesied over my life right there. He said that if I ever
Wow.
wrote in a book what he shared, what God shared with me, that I'd be able to fund a global ministry. At that time, I had never thought I would go to seminary. Never thought I'd be a theologian. Never thought I'd write a book. And so everything he said to me was interesting, but it wasn't what I thought my life would be. Almost 15 years later, actually 2004, so 16 years later, everything that he said has happened. I went to seminary. I wrote a book. I travel across the country. And I really am sharing what God showed me in a vision. So I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And I remember it. My mother and I talk about it almost all the time because it really was an inflection point in my faith walk.
Wow. Dr. Jolly, as you're talking, it reminds me that Dr. Bill Winston actually wrote a book about the king and priest anointing. And what's amazing is you are a person who I believe possesses both of those anointings, where you do have the marketplace component where you're in financial services, you're helping family, you're helping them thrive, and even talking about setting up the next generation for wealth, but you also have the biblical priestly anointing where you yourself consider yourself to be a minister in the very work in which you do. I think
Wow.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you, Jill. And I'm really honored that you said that. And I mean, that's a powerful anointing to have. I will say it is nothing but the grace of God. I've traveled across this country, and many people say, I have never seen someone be able to speak about their faith in such a way that does not offend anyone. And so
Wow.
I just let God be God all by God's self. And I'm a theologian by study and academic training, where theology, religion is what you do about God, spirituality is what you feel about God, and theology is what you think about both. And so I invite people to really think about what their faith means and how do they act out that faith as it relates to finance, business, ownership, and strategy.
Wow. And so, Dr. Jolly, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I know that it plays a bit into what you call the narrow road. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So my dissertation was an existential exegesis of Joshua 1 through 12. I basically asked 7,000 African Americans across the country if in 1968, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King self-identified as a Moses, and 40 years later, the then presidential candidate, now two-term president, said that this was the Joshua era and we are in a Joshua generation. I asked, what's the promised land? How do we get there together? How do we fund it? And what, if anything, do you feel you need to learn to feel more confident of your pursuit? The answers to those questions, city after city, man, woman, young professional, pastor, business owner, faith leader, the patterns started to form and a meta pattern started to form. A meta pattern is a pattern of patterns. And so the narrow road, taken from the book of Matthew, chapter 7, which says that wide is the gate that leads to destruction, but narrow is the road that leads to life. Few find it, and even fewer take it. What I have found is that there is a narrow road as it relates to wealth creation, that there's many different options, but there's really only one choice: taking possession of the promise that you have inherited. And when you choose to take possession of that promise, your steps are ordered, and all things will be given unto you because you will follow the path that you have inherited.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And so, Dr. Jolly, for someone who is not familiar with many of the terms in which you're referring to, and so oftentimes they may say, hey, I came from a family that did not have, I am that first generation. And so I feel as though not just am I taking a narrow road, but I'm pioneering for generations that come behind me. How do you talk to that particular person to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that they want to pursue, they want more, they desire more, and that they don't give up in the fight, because they're basically the ones who are like a Joshua, where they're going to go over for that next generation, and they have the ability to possess all. How do you counsel, or how do you talk to a client like that?
Yeah, so God doesn't build in a period of war. He builds in a period of peace. And so you must find your place of peace. One of the things that I found in my research is that it takes 3 generations to build legacy wealth and only 1 generation to lose it. And so we must remain connected. Now, if you claim to be the first generation, you are in the create stage. You are setting the foundation for the family members and the community members and the friends that are coming beyond you. It's hard work, but with determination, you can multiply your talents and you can build wealth your way. Now, 3 generations to build, 1 to lose. But if the 4 generations stay together and there's 4 generations living, the wealth wheel begins to turn. And that's what is happening. Some of the beautiful things about believers is that we are all sons and daughters of God. And so if you haven't inherited a wealth model from your family, and I actually would beg to differ with you because your first introduction to business is in your family, right? You are an asset that was incubated for 18 years and invested in heavily and loved. And so now you are able to do what it is that you're called to do. But if you can look back 3 generations and you're the 4th, it's time to turn. And my mother would always say, an end in the road is just a bend in the road unless you forget to turn. It's time for us to elevate our standard, to turn up above the clouds of the areas that people say why we can't do it, and to believe that we can because we've inherited the promise of the generations that came before us.
I like that. That's beautiful. And it also talks to the point of strategy, of which your company is a strategic investment firm. Can you talk about the state of the economy now?
Yeah. So it's interesting. In the Bible, when you look at the departure from the wilderness to the promised land, there's a few battles that we have to have. That 3rd battle is the battle of the Gibeonites. And that battle is a battle where Joshua basically partners with kings that dressed down and said, we'll serve you and we are lesser than you. And then they go off. And the next thing you know, the kings that they have betrayed actually are coming against them. And then that's when they pick up the phone and they call Joshua. And then Joshua goes to God and God says, did I tell you to covenant with these people? Now you're going to have to fight a battle that you were not called to fight. But God stopped time and he allowed them to have the time, the capacity, and the ability to win a war that they didn't have to fight. What I see this economy is that 2020 was a period of reset. From 1619 to 2019, that was a 400-year journey. And now it's time to come away with great wealth. If you've been quarantined as I have, God has stopped time. I hope you've gotten focused. Take time to reflect on what is important. I hope everybody is intimately aware of their operating budget. I hope people is intimately aware of their relationship with other people's money as evidenced by their credit score. I hope that people are aware that if they do not own, now is the time with these low interest rates to figure out how you can own. And now is also the time to be transparent if you need help. Because now more than ever, financial firms, corporations, and our government are forced to look for ways to better serve those people who desire to live up to the promise they have inherited as Americans. And so it is important, yes, to be aware of the macroeconomic indicators in our economy. And right now there's a lot of unknowns, but I think it's doubly important for you to be aware of the microeconomic indicators, how your business is operating in this marketplace. I hope you spent time with your family if you're quarantined with your kids. I hope you took time to look at their learning styles and appreciate their teachers. I hope you took time to look at your significant other and appreciate that blood covenant that you have. I hope you took time to take inventory of all the assets that you have in your portfolio so that you can start to define wealth your way. This has been a powerful year for those who are willing to allow the time that God has stopped for them to be able to focus on what really matters.
That's really good, Dr. Jolly, because, it reminds me of something that one of our previous speakers said, that there's no greater opportunity than now. Now is your greatest opportunity. If you're in the now, this is the now. And so what she said is that many times millionaires and billionaires are always created in times of recession and whenever there's an economic depression. And so if you're living in this time and maybe you're one of those people who maybe has experienced job loss or maybe a business may have declined, she talked about that this is your time to seek God, because in this very moment is when God begins to outpour his blessings. His windows of opportunity are made available, and he'll show you things to come, which is what I like what you said. And so how do you go about thinking about business opportunity, ownership, equity in this current climate or this economy?
Yeah. So the reality is that we have 40 years of our earning time to finance 80 years of living, 80 plus years of living. And so literally it's time for you to figure out how to multiply your talents. You know, when we think about that, 85% of most people work for small businesses, not large corporations, and that 66% of our businesses are failing because of COVID. This is an opportunity to really get clear about the entrepreneur in you. You know, what are you going to do to multiply your talents? I believe that God's will done his way receives his supply. I believe that he will supply all of our needs. I believe he's already done so. But what you have to do is take possession of the inventory of talents that you've inherited. And so now's the time to not just have a job just to have a job. I'm praying that everybody pursues their purpose, because when you pursue a purpose, the primary purpose of business is to build wealth for its owner. I take full possession of what God has called me to do, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to do it. He plants me in fertile ground in communities across this country. And so I pray that he will do the same for you. As my grandmother would say, if he did it for me, he will do it for you, because that same God still lives.
Amen. I like that, Dr. Jolly. And so can you talk to us about why is creating a business important to the wealth building process?
Yeah. So listen, I believe that entrepreneurship is a call from God. Not everybody is called to open up an LLC, a C Corp, or an S Corp, but everybody, anybody and everybody with a financial statement is in business. Now, when a business is in the black, it is profitable. So I need everybody to be as black as they possibly can be. And so when I say take possession of your entrepreneurial mindset, listen, you can be an entrepreneur or you can be an intrapreneur. But either way, you have to be able to take the risks that you can afford to take to pursue the promise that you have inherited. And so business ownership is important, but as an entrepreneur of 16 years, business ownership is hard. Now, hard does not mean impossible, and it definitely does mean rewarding, but I mean eyes wide open, because the primary purpose, as I've said over and over again, is to build wealth for its owner. So I don't just want you to hang out a shingle and say, I'm in business. I want you to have a long-term forward-thinking plan to build wealth your way with your enterprise. And so when you think about what business is supposed to do, 85% of our businesses are lifestyle businesses, which means they take care of the owner. The businesses that I work with are legacy businesses. We need more businesses that will pass on for generations. 3 generations to build, 1 to lose. So I'm proud of you if you started your business. I'll be even prouder once you pass it on to that next generation, and they know that they need to pass it on to the next.
Dr. Jolly, you mentioned something there. You said that you work primarily with a lot of legacy businesses, and many times a lot of people don't think about their legacy. So how do you go about creating a legacy plan?
Yeah. So let's start with the definition, because after interviewing 7,000 people, what I realized is that we say the same words, but we don't mean the same things. And so that's why we get excited when we're in a room, because we're all saying the same words, but then when we try to come back together, it's not a very good experience. So the way I define legacy is a narrative that did not begin with you and will not end with you. Now, I'm a strategist, and strategy is connecting the what to the how. Many people know what to do, but knowing how to do gives you the keys to the kingdom. Now, the what, people who pursue the what, they are the first movers, and the first movers get the spoils. They can say, I was the first. How many of you are either the first, or how many of you have firsts in your family? Now, the second mover gets the advantage. That means that it's great to be the first. It's better to be the second. It's even better to be the third and the fourth and the fifth, because the path before you is not uncharted territory. And so when we think about opening up our own businesses, I don't want you to start at an innovative stance. I actually want you to pick up a torch of something that came beyond before you. Because when I looked at our legacy through the lens of business, I found every aspect of business, from private equity to venture capital to crowd equity funding to employee stock option programs, all within our legacy narratives. Now, the reason why they are not mainstays or second moves in our community at the degree in which they can be is because that legacy didn't pass on for generations. That first move became a move that stopped. And so the next person thought that they were doing something new when they were just repeating something that they had not taken time to pick up the torch and carry forward. And so it's important that we pick up the torch and we pass it forward. I'm an inheritor of Sylvia and Vincent Jolly, Bessie Pearl, Benny Lee, Mildred. I am an inheritor of all the Jollies and the Horns that came before me. The reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing is because of who I came from. My grandmothers were my first two investors in my business. One of my grandmothers, before she died, she said, everything that you are, I want it to be. You know what that means? That means that I'm her return on investment. You are the return on investment of your grandparents. You're the equity stored up of your parents, but recognize that they invested in you, and the return is up to you and your options of how you want to pursue wealth your way.
You know, Dr. Jolly, what you said that reminded me of something that I've heard you say before, and that's the fact that there is no wealth gap. And so you said that there's just a lack of knowledge. And so for us to think about the fact that we are the equity of our parents and that we are the investments that our great parents, great grandparents, or great great grandparents made, and we're the offspring. So, you know, the Bible always talks about many times the first there's the blades in the air and then there's the full corn. And so if you think about it in that way, there's someone who actually sowed the seed that we could be here. And so it almost makes you very grateful of the lineage and the legacy that someone laid before you to make sure that you have the opportunities in which you have to become whomever you decide to be.
Exactly. And if you take it on as a mission, that you really want to ensure the legacy continues. You know, my father, right before he passed away, he said, make sure that the legacy continues. He said, you don't even know how much is in your head if you ever got it out, what you could do for your community. And so, you know, the words that your parents bestow upon you, I'm so grateful that I still have my mom and someone who remembers me before I even knew who I was, who prayed over me, who remembers what my grandparents prayed over me. Those things matter. What I found in my research was that faith is a currency. Anybody and everybody, when faced with a financial or a life insecurity, closes their eyes and believes in something. And if you are a believer, bottom line, belief drives your action. So if you feel that you're not where you need to be, if you feel that there is more for you, check your belief system. Because find the unbelief and ask God to help you, because the unbelief is keeping you from the very desired outcome and promise that you desire.
That's beautiful. And so, Dr. Jolly, there is a book that you have that's coming out. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. So 6 years ago, on the first anniversary of my father's death, I launched The Narrow Road, A Guide to Legacy Wealth. This year, on his birthday, I am launching the second book, which is The Narrow Road 2.0, A Journey to Legacy Wealth. The first book gave you an overview of how I constructed the model, what was important, and why wealth as a legacy is important for you to understand. This one takes you through it step by step. Thousands of people have written me about the first book and gave me suggestions and asked me additional questions. I also have conducted cohorts across the country. And so literally I took all of that data and all of that finding and converted it into a roadmap. And so there's 12 steps in this new book. And then the 12 steps, you build a better relationship with money and you define wealth for yourself. And you start to take care of what I call the unfinished business. We have a lot of unfinished business when it comes to wealth creation. And it's time for us to have a wealth reset. The reset is not to do things differently. It just means it's not to do things, do different things. It means to do things differently. And so let's do some things differently. Let's look at this from a wealth perspective. The reason why I don't believe that there is a wealth gap is because when you think about how the wealth gap is defined, it's defined by exterior motives or exterior measurements. In my research, after talking with thousands of us, the way we define wealth is not measured in those increments. And so as a result, if we look outward for wealth when it's such a personal thing, we might fall into somebody else's gap. But when we look inward and have specific questions about how to get to where we desire to go, it's a call for knowledge. The reason why my dissertation is in education is because Christian education is defined as the leading out of the darkness into the light. We've got some darkness in our places we're blinded. We need some light. So let's figure out a way in which we can elevate our standard of business, ask the questions that we need, get the help we need, and start navigating uncharted territory so that we can pursue wealth our way.
All righty, Dr. Jolly, I first want to start by commenting on the fact that your last name is Jolly.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's lots of joy in everything that you do. Can you talk to us about some of your clients?
Yes. So I've been blessed to work with some amazing organizations. One of my favorites is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. It's the oldest Black trade organization in the country, and they focus on democracy and housing. And when I served as their strategist, we worked on a 2 million new Black homeowner initiative. And so I was blessed to be able to go across the country with them to present on the important role that home ownership plays in the African American community. There's a book by Dr. Thomas Shapiro that is called The Hidden Cost of Being African American. And it talks about how home ownership is upwards of 22% of the wealth gap. And so the important role that home ownership plays is beyond just that of the appreciation. It also really helps us to take ownership of our finances and maintain our costs for living and build traditions in our household and have a stakeholder relationship in our community. And so the NARAB organization is such a beautiful organization of African-American real estate brokers across this country who are committed to their community, who give back and also help guide our community towards home ownership. Another client that I really, really enjoy working with is Cities United. Cities United is a national organization that works across the country around public safety. I've been blessed to be their wealth strategy in a community called Russell, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. And so literally that's where Muhammad Ali grew up. And so we're working with this community to be able to really build wealth strategies. It's in an opportunity zone. And so we're really fostering strategies and structures to allow the residents to participate in the changes that are happening in their community. The last client that I'll talk about is my recent one, which is I am now the senior strategist for the American College of Financial Planning. And what's so exciting about this is I'm working with George Nichols, the president of the organization, who's the first African-American president. And we are focused on creating a center of economic empowerment, starting to focus on African-American women. So thinking about ways in which we can accelerate wealth in the African-American community through partnerships and win-win relationships with the financial services industry. And so each one of these relationships really have opened my eyes to the possibilities of what happens when you forge business relationships focused on wealth creation.
Dr. Jolly, so there is a Black Male Initiative that you're a part of. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. So in partnership with Sean Dove of the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, we created the Black Male Equity Initiative, which is based on 2 Chronicles 14:7, which talks about rebuilding the city. And we looked at equity, which is wealth stored up, through the lens of the towers, the bars, the walls, and the gates. And each of those were based on an equity, a legacy narrative of an African-American man. And so literally for a year, we worked with a cohort of Black men, created an anthology, but also really explored the aspect of wealth through a Black male perspective. It was an amazing journey. What the men were doing prior in their businesses and in their nonprofits and in their work was amazing. Coupled with the wealth narrative, it just became something even more amazing. So right now, these Black men are buying homes in their communities. They're pooling capital together. They're just doing so many phenomenal things. And it just really shows that when you have an ongoing dialogue about wealth for the course of a year, powerful things can happen. I did something similar with Willie Barney of the Empowerment Network in Omaha. And this time it was an entire community. And the things that happened with that community were so powerful in terms of credit scores jumped 100 to 200 points. People who thought that they never could buy homes started to buy homes. People who were worried about their children coming home and having to rent, they invited them back into their homes, saved money, and now they're all homeowners. They also went back to their family reunions and shared the wealth with their family. We are starting another cohort in Omaha next month, which I'm very excited about with the new book. And we are pooling capital together in a cooperative investment trust to acquire assets and hold those assets and co-invest with asset managers and high net worth individuals. And so it's beautiful to see the seed that God gave me planted in communities and see the harvest reap on for generations. And so my work with these initiatives, I have a Women in Wealth initiative, but these initiatives are proof that when you order your steps and commit to looking at wealth through the lens of legacy, you can build it according to your own definition.
That is excellent. Dr. Jolly, the only question I have is, are you doing anything in Chicago?
I want to. So Chicago was my second city for my dissertation. And so you know that you have an amazing city. I have spoken at the University, at Kellogg, the business school. And so I look forward to seeing what's possible. You definitely are fertile ground, and I would love the opportunity to be able to host a cohort in Chicago.
Don't worry. I think all of our Chicagoans will be pulling you in very soon. But we appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so very much.
So Dr. Jolly, are there any free resources that are available to our audience?
Yes. So the Legacy Wealth Checklist is something that I created because I kept hearing that we just don't have enough financial models out there for wealth creation in our community. And it wasn't something that we talked about in the dinner table. And so seeing is believing. That's what I found in my research. And so the Legacy Wealth Checklist lets you see the wealth builder in you, what you have yet to do, what you have done, and what are some choices that you have to make to be able to take greater possession of the wealth builder in you. It's located on my website. It's a series of questions. And after you answer the questions, you get a series of emails that encourage you to really build wealth your way. These steps are intricately designed to go through my new book. And so I really help people take ownership. My prayer is that you will be able to check off this entire list so that you can really be confident that the wealth builder inside of you is ready and able to create, build, grow, and expand wealth as a legacy.
I love it. Dr. Jolly, if there is anything else you could tell our Money Monday audience before we close this segment, what would it be around creating wealth and creating legacy?
Yes. So you said it earlier, Jill. The best time to start is now. It's never too late. And things take time, but literally the just shall live by their faith. And so my dissertation was all about unblinding your faith. So open your eyes and unblind your faith with finance, business, and strategy, and watch God order your steps to building wealth your way.
Amen. Dr. Jolly, how can our Money Monday audience get in contact with you?
Definitely. So I have a wonderful landing page. It's pjolly.com/wealth. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Pamela Jolly. And then I have a Facebook page and a podcast called The Jolly Journey. So if you Google me, you'll definitely find me. But pjolly.com/wealth is the best way to stay connected.
Dr. Jolly, thank you for coming on our podcast today. It has truly been a journey as you have been teaching us how to get to wealth and how you have been helping our community succeed and thrive in this season. Thank you for coming on our podcast.
I'm so grateful. Thank you again, and blessings to everyone. And thank you, Pastor Bill Winston, for 16 years ago and now today. We're coming full circle, and I'm looking forward to what God has in store for us all.
Money Monday audience, we want to hear from you. If there's a wealth creation topic you'd like for us to cover, email us at moneymondays@jbs.edu. Remember, in 2020, we are building for wealth, and we're bringing a team of experts to help you get there. Submit your questions in advance to moneymondays@jbs.edu. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell on our Joseph Business School YouTube channel and social media outlets. I'm your host, Geil Thompson, and I look forward to seeing you prosper. Have a great day.